Welcome to Inside Missions, a production of Maranatha Volunteers International, offering an in-depth look at the people, the cultures, and the countries where Maranatha is working. I'm Dustin Comm, and today we have our first repeat guest, Maranatha's Country Director for Peru and Paraguay, Elmer Barbosa. Elmer, welcome back to Inside Missions.
It's a privilege to be back. The last time doesn't count. It was only 20 minutes.
It was episode 5. I actually just watched it again today to see what we talked about. And yeah, we were pressed for time at that point. And so we wanted to bring you back when you had more time to hear a little bit more of your story. We actually got quite a bit in though during that short, 20-minute episode back then. So, but anyway, glad you're here for a little more time. Last time when we were talking, you and I had just spent time in the Amazon region of Peru, and we were going to start working in the city of Pucallpa, a jungle city there in the Amazon.
Yeah.
How did the work go in Pucallpa, and talk about where it expanded to and that all of that work?
Yes, I remember now. We were dreaming of reaching different areas further in the jungle, and part of that dream was to go into Iquitos. Iquitos is a city north of Pucallpa. On a boat ride, it can take several days, depending on how fast your boat go.
And you cannot reach Iquitos by a road. There's no way to get there unless you fly in or
flyer boat. Yes, yeah. That's correct. So we built several churches in Pucallpa. I think like 30 churches in Pucallpa. And after that visit, we built 10 churches, like several in Iquitos and 2 down, 12 hours down boat ride. And I think there was a Maranatha Mission Stories episode about that. Christina and Leo came to Iquitos and we filmed some of those places. And some of those stories are incredible. And it's nice to see how far Maranatha will go to help some of those people, because it's so hard to get to that it makes it expensive. You have to fabricate the structures in Pucallpa, put them on a boat. You have to send gravel to some of those places. You can find sand, but not gravel. They will have sand in the river. And then you move all your tools. We do the one-day church, but it's like a heavy structure now. They're like thick steel tubes, and all that whole logistics is expensive. And some of those places have 20 members, 30 members in the middle of the jungle. You get to one big city, you take another smaller boat, and then you go, and sometimes you have another smaller boat to get to some of those places. So who would go there to help them? It ends up being, $30, $40, $50,000 to help some of those churches. And Maranatha will go there far to make sure that the gospel reaches everywhere. And I think that's pretty cool.
Did we consider changing our structure or using less materials? I was just talking to somebody earlier today about how all of our structures in other countries are built to US code, to some degree, and they're just super sturdy. And sometimes people in other countries are like, do we really need to do it to this level? Did we think about, just because of the logistical challenges, about maybe paring it down a little bit?
Yeah. So what I know that John Menescalca does is calculating wind loads, and depending on the parts of the country, and Peru has a lot of earthquakes, and that's something that they have to consider. So what we did in Peru for those churches, though, is changing the foundation of those churches. So what we're doing in all the other locations in Peru is we either do a complete floor, so we built the whole floor with concrete and a strong foundation. In some areas we do a grade beam, so that has concrete all around, so the members can build the walls in a strong foundation. That was a problem that we noticed sometimes when we leave the one-day church and people decide to build the walls. If they don't have a good foundation, those walls are going to crack, and then you end up with problems. The structure is strong, but the walls are not.
And a ring beam is just basically a line of concrete around the exterior of the footprint of the
That's correct. And then you can build the walls on top of that, and you now ensure that those walls unless they make a huge mistake in calculations, the foundation is going to support those walls. So for those churches in the jungle, what we do is just a footer. So we do a concrete footer that requires now less concrete.
And that's literally just right under the pole of the structure.
Column. Yeah. That's correct. So that reduces the amount of gravel I mentioned that we have to carry to some of those places. So the structure is the same. It's strong, calculated based on the reality of the country, but we don't need to finish the whole wall, because in some of those places they're not going to build block walls. They're going to maybe use wood. That's what they can find easily. They can cut that legally. If you live in the area, it's like you're cutting trees. You're actually like using for your church or your home. You are allowed to do that. So some of those structures only going to receive wood walls, and in that case you don't need a strong foundation to build walls on top. So we do think of some of the ways that we can make that operation make sense.
I'll be sure to include a link to the Maranatha Mission Stories television episode on Iquitos, and people will be able to see some of that. When we were in Pucallpa, I remember termites. It was such a problem with a lot of those structures, and I remember hearing from the aviation ministry, Peru projects that they would go out and try to help with some of these congregations, and they would rebuild some of these wooden structures, but then eventually the termites would just get it.
And that episode, if you watch it, I'm not gonna talk too much about it, but you're gonna see a story of a lady explaining how those wood structures, when they have to be replaced ever so often, becomes a burden to the community. So you think, oh, they have a church. It's it's wood. It's not too bad. It looks clean, and it's nice to have a church. But we sometimes don't think of the burden of like every so often having to collect money from a congregation that doesn't have a lot of money to replace the walls and the roof of your church because termites are eating the whole structure up. So it becomes something on your budget. Like, okay, if we want to continue to have our church, we need to waste money on something that in a year we're going to have to replace again. And now she was talking about how having a permanent structure can change that. You do it once, that's going to last forever, and it reduces the cost of, at least now those poles will be permanent. And
the structure is not compromised.
Yes.
It's not going to fall down.
Yes.
That's something we don't think about a lot, but it can happen if in a storm.
Yes, for sure. So it's a great blessing to have something permanent that you don't have to be wasting money every so often.
Since we talked in episode 5, you are also now the country director of Paraguay. Maranatha started working in Paraguay. Tell us about the opportunity for the Adventist Church in Paraguay.
Yes, so I forgot about that. Paraguay is one of the 8 countries in the South American Division territory. And it's particularly a country that the church has a presence for over 120 years, but it hasn't grown very much. It's hard to evangelize people in Paraguay. So when Maranatha came 20 years ago, we built 20 churches for them. And I was talking to a pastor down there, and he was telling me, yes, since you guys left, there was no other big push to build churches in the country. So it's been 20 years. And yes, other churches have been built, but not in the same way that we did. We did 20 structures and like a large EEC in the boarding school, CADEP.
And that's a big, huge building with multiple, like 10 classrooms around a central auditorium.
Right, that's correct. So we use those terms sometimes. People don't know what an EEC is. So it's evangelism and education evangelism center. Yeah, thanks. So all of that happened 20 years ago, and now we come back and we have the opportunity to build another 25 churches. And we've been all over the country. There is a part of the country that is called Chaco. That's kind of like super dry and arid. So there's not a lot of people living there. But they have about 7 million people living in Paraguay, and most of them are to the middle, towards the south. And we're building churches all over the area. And it becomes a relief to the local church there, the administration of the church, because it's something maybe we don't think about too often, is that when you have a small congregation and a lot of that congregation is young and they don't work, and you have a lot of people that have low income, you end up with a church that is not financially healthy. So to build a church, you need money. So some of the members, they will put some money together and then they can maybe rent something. And some of those structures, if you go to Maranatha Mission Stories, you're going to see some of those as well. They're very simple. Some members meeting under trees and some members meeting in rented spaces. And now we come and we do another big push, another 25 churches. And Paraguay is a unique situation in the South American division because you have a lot of countries that grow a lot. So you have Brazil that has a large membership. You have Peru, they have almost 500,000 Seventh-day Adventists. And then you have Paraguay that has struggle. So the church is doing different ways to help, and Maranatha is now joining forces with them to support that growth. And the program goes where the division is helping put in the facade, Maranatha is building the church. We have a lot of groups. That's something it was unexpected. I'm going to say that. When we first started in Paraguay, I was having a conversation with Cairo and was like, we don't know how many people will actually come to Paraguay. Not a lot of people know Paraguay. Probably not a lot of people even know where the country is in the map if you ask them. And we'll see. And then we ended up with like a large, I think we're going to have almost 1,000 volunteers this year in Paraguay. Wow. So we have a family project with 150. We have UW that now has Ultimate Workout, the teens project with over 100 people. And then we're going to have several groups coming to Paraguay this year. So yes.
And I'm coming.
Yes.
I'm going to go check it out here in a couple of weeks.
That's true. Yes, you can tell some of those stories.
Yeah. You said that the church has had a hard time growing. Is that partially because of the lack of infrastructure?
I believe so. I believe that has an impact on, like, you go to a church that has no buildings. For example, I'm going to mention Liberación. That's a church that was mainly ladies meeting in that place. And for years, they met under trees and in someone's home. So we've seen this story over and over with Maranatha when we go to different places. But it's a situation where some people don't want to go to a home. Like, I don't know that person. I don't want to go to their living room every Sabbath. So you feel uncomfortable to do that. Then you have a situation where it's raining. So if you're meeting under a tree, what you do. And because we hear about that so often, we kind of think, that's another church that is meeting under a tree. But the reality is that a lot of people will not go to a church that is not a building. And when you plan to grow, let's say a church, the union in Paraguay, let's help. They don't have enough funds. They don't have enough funds to help all the churches. So you cannot build. You end up with a lot of congregations that want to grow. They want to invite their friends and they don't have a building. So now changing that situation is creating a great impact. I was just showing this morning in staff meeting here, someone getting baptized in the San Pablo church. And it's a church full of young people. They're renting a little space and later they're meeting under a tree. Now they have the structure. They're having an evangelism campaign and someone got baptized. So I'm sure that having a building, a physical building where you can meet and invite your friends can make a huge difference, to evangelize the area.
I remember hearing a story of a lady who had moved to a town. I don't know if it was Compañía 7.
Yeah.
And she just didn't even know she was looking for a church, but she drove by this group just under a tree and didn't know it was a church.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a church. It looks like a house. Where that location, they had no roof when we came to visit. They have a roof now, but if you look from outside, there's no stucco on the wall. They still have no windows. And so, it doesn't look like a church. It just looks like an abandoned building.
Is that site an Ultimate Workout church?
No, okay. That site's going to be built by the place church is coming to help them. I think they're from south of California and they're coming over to build the church, I think now in June or July. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I thought I had a great segue to Ultimate Workout, but I've forgotten which church's Ultimate Workout's working on.
Yes. Campo 9 is the other one that UW is coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us about Ultimate Workout, and you're the project leader for this project. Yes. Have you ever led Ultimate Workout?
So I've been with Maranatha for 18 years, and in that time I've been around Ultimate Workout several times. So some of those times were receiving the project as a country director. So in Peru, 2022, the project was in Peru, in Tacna. Rebecca was still leading that project, and then last year they came back to Peru again. There was in Sicuani, and I've been in Bolivia. So I've been around UW. but this is going to be my first time leading the project. And I would say that Maranatha has different kinds of projects. So family project, that's made for families. If you want to have a family experience, there's someone thinking of your kids. So like something is prepared for kids. And then you have projects for young adults and just open teams where everyone can come. And then you have UW that's very unique. And I would say it's the most challenging, project, because you have to take care of kids. I imagine, like, my daughter's 7, so in another 6 years she may be a participant, and sending your kid to a different country, she's going to travel alone, it can be scary for parents, and we take that very seriously. And we also take very seriously the fact that the mission of UW is to connect teens with Christ. So the thing is, if we fail to connect teens with Christ, UW failed. So you have all that aspect of having teenagers on the project, having to coordinate several sites, a large project. Not a lot of Maranatha projects have over 100 people. We have some of those, but it's not every project. So it creates a different challenge having multiple sites. UW does great work with medical teams and VBS, that's like taking care of children in the community, teaching them about Jesus. So you have so many activities happening at the same time, and you have to keep the kids safe. You have to find intentional ways to connect them with Christ. And so, yes, I'm taking that very seriously.
Are you worried?
No, I am. Yes, you can see that. Like, the thing is, we do have a great team of people, and what I'm doing is that I'm not coming in to save the project. It's like you have Loretta that has been with UW. She was here recently, and this is something that she can do with her eyes closed. At least one eye closed, because UW is difficult. But she can tell you her passion for UW, and I'm part of the team. And we have Pastor Christian joining us for the first time. So we have a few new staff that are coming in, but Maranatha's great at doing this. So it's not like, I'll be, I'm part of a great team of people. So my job is just making sure the kids stay safe, and there is someone, Loretta's coordinating the spiritual part of the project. We have someone coordinating the medical part. So yes, we'll be okay. But yes, I'm worried.
You'll be fine. Yeah. It's going to go great.
But yes, I'm worried.
Yeah. Well, we're looking forward. Have you led a Maranatha project before? You've always been there supporting it, as a Maranatha staff person. But I've never led a Maranatha project. So.
When we started expanding the work of Maranatha to Brazil, part of the goal was to create opportunities for Brazilians. Maranatha hasn't done a lot of that. So we have a permanent office in India, for example, but that's usually to receive projects. So it creates a legal structure for the organization to receive projects in India. And then we have done that in like Canada. But when we decided to have an office in Brazil, the idea was to have something similar to what we have here. So it would be an affiliate of Maranatha in Brazil. And when we started to dream about how that would work, part of the dream was, can we have projects, Brazilians going to the same places Americans are going? And the first group to go to Angola, and the only group to go to Angola, it was impossible to get visas for everyone else. So there was only one group of volunteers in Angola, and there was a group from Brazil. So that was the first trip I led internationally from Brazil. So we took 15 people from Brazil to Angola, and then we did a few projects inside of Brazil. So I would lead all of those. I would organize them and then lead those projects. And after some time, what I did was we find great volunteers on some of those trips. So we trained them, and then they started to lead trips. And we would do training sessions. And recently, I was in Paraguay. I was leading a project. It was intended to be a multilingual project, but it filled up in a week with Americans. So we had my parents were there. So there was like 2 people that spoke Portuguese. Yeah. So I've led a few projects, but nothing this big. So this is going to be different. 110 teenagers is special.
What's it like as a Maranatha country director, having to then lead a project as a project leader? Like, do you have to switch modes?
Yeah.
Or
you kind of do. When you have to control the construction, and you have to think, okay, I can trust the person doing the construction. I don't have to be leading the construction aspect. It's something we do as a country director, is making sure that every material is ready, that they're ready to receive the group, all the tools are ready for them. At that point, you don't have time to focus on everything, otherwise nothing goes as expected. So you have to focus on the experience of the volunteers. So you kind of have to trust that your team is going to do everything else and then focus on the experience. And you have to switch modes, because you have to think of the spiritual aspect of the mission trip. When we do international mission trips, the spiritual part is very important. So you plan the worship, so you have to make sure that the hotel is okay. Sometimes we do food, sometimes we use the hotel will offer meals. When we do the food, that becomes a whole different thing. You have to wake up super early to buy food. So yeah, you kind of have to know that at that time, I'm not a country director right now. I'm just leading the project, and just switch. It doesn't work, to do everything together. Yeah,
makes sense. When you think about when we first entered Paraguay, you've been involved, I think, with multiple countries when Maranatha has started working there.
Yeah.
In Peru, in Paraguay, maybe in Brazil when we
first started in Brazil.
Back to Brazil.
Yes.
So
in Angola it was.
And in Angola too.
Yeah, when we started in Angola, at that time, Ron Queiroz was the country director, and they had a hard time to get the container release, so they were there for 6 months. After a little while, we decided that they're going to move out, and Maranatha decided to go back to Angola and continue what we had planned. And there was no one that spoke Portuguese. So, there's 10 countries in the world that speak Portuguese. So the obvious thing was to, let's find someone in Brazil. Maranatha was operating in Brazil. I was there. And it was a funny thing, because Kyle sent us a message, and I was just married. It was before I got married, actually. And they said, we need someone in Angola. And I thought they were saying, could you go to Angola? So I told Hannah, my wife, said, hey, we're going to get married soon. And Maranatha is asking if we'll go to Angola. Would you go to Angola? And that was okay. I'm going to get married and go live in Africa. And after a lot of conversation, she was like, all right, let's do it. So I told Kyle, yes, we're ready to go. And it's like, no, I don't need you to go. You need to stay in Brazil. So we found someone that was Eder. Pastor Eder was in charge of Angola, and he was new to Maranatha. He had not worked with Maranatha before, but he had lived in Angola before with Edra many years ago. So it was an ideal person to be in the country. He spoke Portuguese and knew the culture, but he had to learn the construction aspect. So I moved to Angola for about a month right after I got married. So I had my honeymoon and then moved to Angola for about a month. So I trained the team and helped Pastor Eder to set up, and then I went back to
I'm going to come back to your honeymoon and first months of being married in Africa. But I'm curious, since you've gone through this multiple times, what does Maranatha do? I don't think I've ever asked anybody about this on our podcast. How does Maranatha enter a new country and set up operations?
Okay. So we do a meeting with the church. The church guides our decisions. So you probably talk to people that have explained this here, but Maranatha doesn't pick where we go and doesn't pick the projects that we do. We let the church decide that. So they know their needs in the country. Let's use Paraguay, for example. They understand the country better than we do. So we let them decide where the churches are going to go. So once we arrive, the first thing is, where are the churches that you said you need? Let's say 25. So we go visit all those places, and then we decide with Kyle in his department, projects. I don't think we call it projects. That's confused, because I think Lisandro's department is projects.
He's volunteers. Kyle Feast is our VP of projects, but there used to be construction.
Yes.
Daryl Hardy. So
anyway. that department with Kyle decides, are we going to do churches, schools, water wells? Are we going to fabricate the structures here? Or are we going to import them? So all those decisions are done in the beginning. So you decide, let's import them from Peru. And you start in the process and you figure out, we can't do that. We need to create a shop in Paraguay. So you start with those decisions. And then after you understand the scope of the work, how many churches can we do this year? Let's do 12. That was the decision for last year. Let's do 12 churches in 24, and then we'll do 12 more in 25. So once you decide the scope and you decide what you're going to build, now you prepare the budget. Let's see how much it's going to cost. Let's see how many people we have to hire. And then let's bring people to help us do that. So Maranatha has a lot of supervisors that do construction for us, for several decades. Some 30 years, 40 years have been working with us. We decide who comes to lead the work of construction. You organize a team of people and decide, okay, so we're going to have Jonathan, for example, leading the construction. We're going to set up a shop to fabricate in Paraguay. And then after that, it starts to roll the construction. Let's go to the first site, and then you hire the first workers in the country. We don't move everyone from outside, just the leadership. And then the difficult part is that you have to deal with legal aspects of each country. So in Peru is one way. You go to Paraguay, the legal requirements are completely different. You have to set up accounting in each country. So Maranatha has international accounting that is done from here, but every country has accounting systems in place. So we work with the church. We don't do that. Like in Brazil, we have an office, but that's unusual. In most places, Maranatha works through the church. So all the legal aspects is done by a lawyer that works for the church. The accounting, the finances is done through the church. So we work with the church to organize all that aspect. And then we go starting with the first church. After you've done that, you go and then you expand.
People start to get the feel for how we're making those buildings. And
yes.
Interesting.
So summary.
Yeah. Well, it's an involved process. There's lots of details that have to be taken care of before any volunteers are even thought about.
Oh, yes, exactly. Yeah. And that's another decision that can be done in the beginning. Is this a country where we can receive volunteers? Is it safe for volunteers, or are we just helping? Maranatha usually works in countries where we can bring volunteers, and we can only decide where the volunteers are going to go after we get started. So, okay, now I know which structures we're going to build, and we decide, okay, we can bring volunteers here. The cities have hotels. Some places, like I was talking about Peru, in the jungle, you cannot bring a group there unless they sleep on a boat in the river, and that hasn't been done recently. I know we've done some of that in the past, but so you make those decisions and you start to build on top of that. But I think deciding what to build and where to build is the first part. So let's build this type of church because we visited the places and we understand that that's what they need. The sites are small, or like they have a lot of members. We need to increase the size of the church. So you need to look at the sites and understand the reality. What's the need? Talk to the people. Once you understand that, you start to make those small decisions. So now let's bring volunteers in and grow. So
interesting. All right, back to your new marriage, and you guys moved to Africa for a little bit. Just what was that experience like?
Oh, so I actually moved alone. Hannah stayed in Brazil.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I was. It was interesting because I had a conversation with Hannah when I don't know if everyone does that, but before we got married, I think it was good for our marriage. If you're a young person, I'm going to give my advice here. Some conversations you need to have before you get married. So finances, some people don't think about that, and you have a lot of problems. And in our case I want to do missions. And Maranatha may ask me to go to Africa, may ask me to go to another country. Are you willing to travel with me? And if she would have said no, that was in the beginning of getting to know each other. If she would have said no, it would not have worked. So it was a big deal for me. It was important to me. And for her, it was, do you want to have kids? And I was like, yes, I want to have kids. And for her, she said, if you don't want to have kids, this is not going to work. So, there was a lot of other things that we discussed, but that was one of the things. So when Angola came to the conversation, it wasn't something like, wow, we're getting married and now you're saying that we need to move to a new country. It was something we had talked about. And she just was like, wow, let's move to Africa, but yes, let's do this. But like after you get married, you do your honeymoon and you spend a month away. That was,
not ideal. But
she moved to Recife, where Maranatha had its office. And after 15 days, I left her alone.
Yeah.
We did have friends there that helped us. And she had lived in Recife when she was, from 6 to 12 years old. So it wasn't like completely new to her, but yes, it was interesting too.
And you had already been in Africa for years before then, right?
Yes.
It seems like both of you have a disposition for missions. It's something that you enjoy. Looking back on yourself, did you know
No.
I think you had told me that you initially went for the church as a missionary for just like a year, and you didn't think you were going to stay, but you ended up staying. Now it's been like 18 years. So
I grew in the church, like my parents. I'm a third generation Adventist, and to me, we were just going through this for social media, where you think of the culture. To me, doing missions was one of those things where you check a box, like, okay, I want to do this, and it wasn't like to check the box, but it was something I would like to do. When I want to visit those countries, and I would love to be a missionary for at least 1 year. And when the opportunity happened, I had, maybe I talked about this. Oh, maybe I can go live in the UK. And then there is this opportunity of being a missionary. And then when that worked out, it was special, but I wasn't dreaming that I would be a long-term missionary. It was just something I wanted to do, at least to see how it went. But it was such an amazing experience. I was 20 years old, I was young. I had no other commitments in life. And being involved in missions in that way, it was really exciting to me. You get to know how the church is growing in a different continent, and how you have a lot of people that love Jesus in Mozambique. It wasn't a country that was just receiving the gospel. They had a lot of people that, love Jesus in there. And then you meet like so many amazing people, and you see the need. And now it's like, how do you walk away from this? It's hard. You can just decide, okay, I've done my part. I'm going home. I was touched to continue to be involved. And, you look back, you make decisions in life, and you don't know how it would have gone if I had decided to leave. But I'm thankful to God that He has given me the opportunity to start my professional life in Africa. It led me in a way that I'm happy. I'm happy, involved in God's work in the way we do, and in missions. I think it's something amazing. A lot of people would love to do what I do. Sometimes it's a little romantic in the way, oh, it's nice to be a missionary. There is, the regular work things that we have to do. But I feel, I'm privileged to be involved in God's work in the way we do, and be touching so many different places, and be constantly reminded of how God is doing amazing things all around the world. It's not only, oh, I see this in my neighborhood. I see how the church is growing here. I see how people are in love with Jesus here. I see that in different continents, in the work we do with Maranatha. And I really feel privileged to be involved with this. But yeah, I wasn't, dreaming of being a lifelong missionary,
And now you and Anna are a true missionary family. I mean, you have 2 kids. You guys have lived in multiple countries now. And how has that been for your kids? Moving, and in fact, you guys just in the last week or so moved to the United States here. And so they've had to go through that transition again. What has that been like?
Yes, I think you talked to Susan Woods about third culture kids. And when we had our kids, we started to study about that. It's something you think carefully when you have to travel. Like I said, I told Hannah, we're going to be moving every once in a while. And Maranatha usually stays in country 6, 7, 8 years, and then we move. So you can expect that if you're having a career with Maranatha, you're going to be moving constantly. And there is a great privilege in having your kids getting to know different cultures. They get to, meet amazing people. They have different languages. So our kids live in Peru now. Maya was alphabetized. Is that how you say? Like he was literacy. What's the word in English? She learned how to write and read in Spanish.
Yeah.
Teach me the word there.
I don't know.
Yeah. So
she's literate.
Literate,
maybe in Spanish now.
In Spanish now, So it's a privilege to have that. And now we're moving to the States, and
she already knew English.
She knew a little bit of English, but she's gonna have to, learn how to be fluent in English. I'm sure she's gonna be much better than we do. But it's on the details, thinking about how it's hard for them to be away from family. We spent a few months in Brazil now, and you have to say goodbye all the time. You only come for a month. And when you do that calculation, you're going to be with your grandparents, let's say, every year for a month. That's going to be, until she decides where she wants to live, 18, 17 years until, maybe I want to move back to Brazil. But if not, it's very few times you get to meet family. And then there are so many other challenges being a third culture kid, but there is a great privilege. And what we do is try to minimize the challenges and maximize the benefits. It's hard. It's not simple, like it's easy saying that way. But right now, what we have noticed is it's still easy to move with the kids because they're young. Adam is 5, Maya is 7. And for them, home is where family is. So we moved into the new apartment. They're having a great time, setting, furniture, putting furniture together. And then, oh, this is the new place. So this is where we live. Look at the city. Look at how things are. She was 2 when we moved to Peru. So, mommy and daddy are here, that's home. And I think it's going to be harder when they're teenagers, because then you start to develop your own life. You have your friends. Now you have your environment where you're used to. If we have to move when they're like 12, 13, that can be much harder. You can imagine that. You have, I don't know what Austin is, but yeah. So, it maybe much harder then. But now I think, home is where family is. So
I remember a few years ago asking you, do you ever miss home? And I meant Brazil. And you said, the people, but home is where we're at. And, that is truly, the family bond that you guys have is kind of the strongest thing that you have.
Yes, that's a point. I think there is even a book that Hannah was reading to the kids that talks about that. It tries to teach your kids that if you move around a lot, you need to have that family bond really strong, because everything can fall apart, but not the family bond. So they can know that if things are not going okay outside in school or when I go to church or anything, I know that when I come back home, I'm safe. I'm, with my family, and I'm going to be okay. So this is important, like, creating that environment where they can feel that way. And as parents, that's our challenge, creating that environment where they can feel that way. So yeah, but it's nice. It's we enjoy moving. That's something a lot of people don't enjoy. We enjoy moving. To us, it's like we were in Peru for 5, almost 6 years, and after like every 2 years, we were like, okay, Maranatha is not moving us. Should we move? Like the lease on the apartment is almost over. Should we move to another house? Yeah, let's move to another house. You just move to a new neighborhood and you meet new people. But yeah, we enjoy moving. So.
When you first moved to Mozambique as a 20-year-old, what was the culture like there? Because that was the first time you'd been outside of actually, you said that was the first time you'd been on a plane.
First time I traveled, yeah.
Yeah, yes. So, now you're super experienced with different cultures. And so moving to the US, recently is not a big deal for you, but what was it like as a 20-year-old and living in Africa?
You have all those misconceptions. I don't know when was the first time you went to Africa, but I was expecting to land in Africa and then see giraffes and see elephants outside of the airplane. I had not traveled, so to me everything was new and amazing. A 20-year-old, like, look at the airplane. And then I first landed in Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe was going through financial challenges back then. Pastor Gilberto, that works with us now as our country director for the Dominican Republic, he was a vice president for the division. And he was the one that invited me to come. I was a student missionary working with the church back then. So I spent 2 weeks in their home, and everything was amazing to me. A new country. Like I said, I had never traveled, never been in an airplane. Getting to know Africa. If you've been to Zimbabwe, they have gone through challenges, but it was a beautiful country, very modern. Like, they have roads that have been planned with trees that blossom in the same color. So it's like, you imagine Africa being dry and like everyone is thirsty, and then you get there's amazing places and amazing people. There's a lot of wealth in a different way in Africa in some parts. Yes, the challenges are true, but I wasn't thinking that was going to be the case. To me, it was going to be animals. And, some people have misconceptions about Brazil the same way. I was here the other day and I mentioned I was from Brazil. A couple of people, oh, you're from the jungle. Brazil's huge. So a lot of people don't understand it. I was the same way. I thought Africa was going to be animals and things like that. And getting to know the different cultures. Mozambique, for example, they had 52, if I'm not mistaken, like different languages they're kind of official, and lots of others that are not official languages. And then you learn about their politics. They have problems like every country has in politics, and they fight, and then sometimes they have wars, and that sometimes is different. The fighting that happens in politics in some of the countries can be different when you're in countries that have a lot of tension. So you start to learn all that, and I think it's a great opportunity to grow, because if your country is all you know, your view of the world is very limited. When you get to experience new cultures and get to learn from new people, like you listen to their stories, their struggles. Like I remember in Mozambique, the expectancy of life was like 50 years old. And we had a guy that was working with us. He was like 54, 55. That's super young. But like you kind of hear them talking about friends, they were like joking, like, hey, you're almost, in that time. And you start to understand, wow, the life expectancy of 50 years old. My parents were 50 years old back then. And, like everything is like huge. And the sad part though, is that after a little while, things start to become normal. When you see a little, they carry things in this different vehicle, or they go a lot of people in one motorcycle, or look at what they're eating, and like all that amazement of, getting to know new things. Sometimes, after 3 months, that's normal.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's incredible till this day, getting to know. So I intentionally tell volunteers that, and I try to do that myself, is to look at the good stuff in countries, because you can focus on the bad stuff and be frustrated really quickly. And imagine like if you go to Africa and you decide to focus on the bad things. Okay, I'm committing to a whole year of suffering here. I think I mentioned in the last podcast of like bombs flying over, and you can focus on the bad stuff happening. And but if you decide I'm gonna focus on the good stuff, and know that the bad stuff's going to happen anyway, there's so much amazing things happening all around us. And that's true for every mission trip, every time we go to a different country.
And the story of you even getting there, I think, is a remarkable. There's connections that happened. Yes. That I don't think we had time in the first episode, if you want to summarize how you even got to Africa in the first
Mozambique.
place.
Yeah, so I was finishing my college degree, and I heard from one of my teachers, my son is here, Pastor Gilberto. He's looking for missionaries to help in Mozambique. The story goes back. I don't think we're going to have a lot of time. I'm going to summarize. Gilberto has worked with a lot of organizations in Africa. He has been in Africa for, I think it's like 25 years working in many different countries. And in that time, he had heard about Maranatha. He was in a GC session. I think it was in the year 2005, if I'm not mistaken. And one lady that lived in Mozambique came to him and insisted that he talk to Maranatha. You need to talk to this organization. And he had heard about Maranatha, was like, they're never going to come to Africa. They don't work in Africa. And back then, we had not worked in Africa. And he decided he was going to do that. They had a conversation during that GC session, and Maranatha said, okay, how many churches do you want? And he was like, let's talk between them. And they said, we need probably 1,000 in Mozambique. And Maranatha said, okay, we cannot do 1,000 because we just had India 1,000. And they decided, okay, let's do 1,001 just to be different. That became a little joke. But the need is huge in Africa, and that was a real need. It wasn't a joke. It was a real need. So Maranatha said, you need to bring a translator. Like which country? Mozambique. You need to bring a translator because you don't have anyone that speaks Portuguese. So that's when he went to my university. His dad was a teacher there. He taught us Latin. And after class, I decided, okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to summarize here, but the first time I went to the meeting, they said, no, there's already one guy. We only need one guy, and the others have to be ladies to teach in different schools. But the guy didn't show up for the meeting. He said, if he doesn't show up to the next meeting, maybe you can join. The guy didn't show up for the second meeting, and Gilberto looked at me, 20 years old. I was skinny like this. It's like, this guy's not going to last in Africa. So he gave me a list of documents to get. You need to get a letter from the boarding, the director of the school, of a teacher that can tell you that speak a little English and everything. He was trying to make it difficult. He told me that later, let's see if this guy can actually do this. After I got everything, he's like, oh, this guy's not giving up. Let's get a visa. And he was hoping that, well, maybe the visa is going to be too difficult. He's going to give up. And the visa actually came. In that time, that's when that UK process happened. I had a friend there, and then he was saying, hey, come to study English. I was studying to be English teacher for Brazilians, and to me, going to the UK and learning English would be good for my career. And then there was that decision. I spoke with the pastor back home, and then I said, hey, I have this, his name was Joel Sarli. He actually worked for the GC for some time. And he said, look, I understand you have a decision to make, going to the UK to learn English or going to Africa. I know Maranatha. I know that they will take care of you. My parents were with me, like, is it going to be okay for him to go to Africa? He's 20 years old. And it's like, I know Maranatha. They're going to take care of you. The thing that I say is that you can always learn English anywhere, but Africa needs you now. When he said that, I was like, okay, I think I understand what God is telling me here. And I decided to go. And then there was, I think I told the story of the bombs. After 3 months I was there, bombs flying over the house, and he was like, okay, are you going to go back home? And I decided to stay. And then there's a lot of little miracles, but in summary, yes.
Did you tell your parents about the bombs?
After a few months. Things calmed down. It was not a problem. Like, they were trying to figure out even what happened. When they learned it was probably someone maybe messing with that, or like the heat made the bombs fly off. After like a few months had passed, I told, hey, by the way, there was a few a few bombs flying over the house. But
oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was okay. I survived.
And you built a ton of churches. We talked a little bit about that in the first episode.
Yeah. It was a transition. So my first job was to visit the sites. I came as a student missionary to visit 1,000 sites. Remember the 1,000 number. And that was a privilege because I got to visit 1,000 places in Mozambique. Not a lot of Mozambicans know their country as I do. I got to go everywhere. Yeah. And when I say everywhere, it's everywhere. And then after I finished that, I had a conversation with David Woods. He was my boss back then. He was the country director for Mozambique. And he said, look, you visited all the countries. I would love for you to stay, but you would have to stay and help us with construction. Maranatha is just starting something new, a one-day church. And if you're interested. And back then I remember thinking, I was in my car. He gave me a call and we talked about that a little bit. And I remember thinking, imagine if I want to continue with Maranatha for several more years. The organization does construction. So if I want to stay with the organization, I could go, doing volunteer support. That would be one route. But I remember thinking, well, if I learn construction, that may not be a bad thing. So I called him back and said, yeah, let's do this. I'm interested in learning. And one of those decisions, I think it was a good decision, looking back. It was great to have that experience in construction we built. I think myself, along with Marlon, there was another supervisor. We were in charge of 5 teams, taking care of the logistics, moving structures around. So we would drop off a crew here and then drop off the structure, drop off like 4 more structures, and then come back and pick up this crew, move this one here. The other crew would go to the next one, and then you have to be thinking of dropping off. We would build like 20 churches in a week. Back then, the one-day church was the simple church that you would assemble with the screw guns. And so there was a lot to learn back then, doing all that. And I'm thankful that I decided to learn construction. And that became a good thing. Now, later, when I became a country director, it's like, okay, why are you taking on that position? Well, I was going back to Brazil. I spoke the language. I had built almost, I think it was back then, like 400 or 500 churches myself, and we're going to do the same thing. So it was something, it was, to me, I could almost do that with my eyes closed, after 400, repeating. And so, yeah, it was.
And you had your hand, or you were connected to another 500 there in Mozambique, right? You guys did around 1,000.
Yeah, so I did in Mozambique. I think Maranatha built 800. I stayed there for the first 400, and David Woods was transferred to Malawi. When he got transferred to Malawi, he invited me to come and help him get started. So I came to help train the crews. I was doing the Wendy churches in Mozambique. We're going to do the same thing. So I moved with him to Malawi. I lived 6 months in Malawi. And that's when we built the first 50 churches. And Jan Dutoit, a South African, was trained, and he was leading the crews. building more churches, and then I left to Brazil. So
I was just
that,
trying to do the math of how many churches you've been like
involved,
connected to,
yes,
because there was like 1,000 churches in Brazil after
yes.
you were there.
So I think the calculation now is close to 1,600.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And again, look at the privilege, you know. I always, maybe I mentioned that in the last time we talked, but I always had this dream of teaching someone about Jesus and doing a Bible study and seeing someone that I was involved, like getting baptized. And I have not seen that yet. You know, I have not seen anyone like 100% connected with Jesus through a work that I've done. So sometimes I feel like, you know, like building 1,600 churches is not enough. I still have to give a Bible study and baptize someone, you know, but some people like 1,600 churches, you know. So yes, it's pretty amazing, but I still want to do that Bible study and tell someone about Jesus.
At our convention in September 2024, every year, Don Noble talks to all of us staff before we start like getting ready for the event. And I think that's what he talked about this last year. He said, you know, how many churches have you been involved with? How many churches have you been involved with? And his point was, you know, you think of evangelism as preaching, but how many of those churches are preaching? And think of all the evangelism that you've been a part of over all of these years. It's a pretty.
I'll take it.
You may not have been giving the Bible studies and doing the baptizing, but you have definitely had a hand in a lot of people's faith journeys for sure.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. It's again a privilege.
So, you personally, you know, we're talking about all these people that have been impacted by the buildings you have, you know, helped to build. But if you had to boil it down into one or two things, you know, how have you grown over the last 18 years, you know, with Maranatha as a person?
Like imagine being exposed to. I think I've been to 20 countries or like 15 countries with Maranatha, and just getting to know different cultures, getting to respect different cultures, and understanding how we're so different and still like we need the same thing. That's Jesus. It's big, and you know, like we have our professional journeys where you learn, you evolve, you put a little effort here. God gives you blessings to be around people that will teach you and help you grow. And it's been 18 years. I have only worked for Maranatha in my entire life. You know, you always wonder, you know, what it would be if I had not been with Maranatha. I don't know. We'll never know. We'll ask Jesus in heaven if there was a different path that would be interesting. But I think it's a great privilege again to be involved in such a great work in missions around the world and getting to know different people. Like my colleagues, they are country directors. We get to learn from each other all the time. We have traveled to some of the countries to see what they do, and you understand their challenges. And we have, you know, our life is happening, and like right now India is having challenges. I was just talking to Vinesh, sending him a text, and he was appreciating, like, you know, thanks for the prayers, we need that right now. You know, like I'm in the middle of moving here, he's in the middle of a situation where things can get really complicated over there. So I think it's great to have this different perspective in the world that very few people will have. You know, I'll get to heaven. Let's imagine if you've never been around, you may get to be reunited with your family from your church, and like, oh, maybe I know a few hundred people. If you go to a lot of pet finders meetings and things like that, make it maybe a little more. I've been involved with people in 16 different countries that, you know, have been crossing our paths and like talking about Jesus and how they're doing amazing work to tell others about Jesus in their countries, and then we'll be reunited with them in heaven. It's going to be a different celebration than when you only get to know your family in your country, you know. So it's nice.
And think of all the thousands of people that have come through the different Maranatha churches.
Yeah, it's going to be a great part.
So now I want to ask you, from all these experiences, is there any Maranatha person, whether it's a volunteer or a staff person, that has, just impacted you in a special way? It sounds like that's true, but it might be hard to choose, or not choose, but like think of something specific.
Yes, it's hard, like you say, because you're a sum of all the people around you. You know, you learn from everyone. I know that David and Susan's, they were like parents to me when I first moved to Africa. Imagine a 20-year-old and you in the middle of Africa now, and you just, now here's a vehicle, this is your assignment, go visit 1,000 places. And having their support in Africa and like family to me, it was a huge thing, you know, and they took care of me as their own child, you know. So even to this day, Markel and Janelle, they were there with Justin, the son. I didn't get to know him very much. He was in the States studying back then, but Janelle and Markel, they taught me English in the beginning. They were very patient to tell me, repeat this, weird. I would try that, not like that, again, weird. So I remember those things, and they're like family to me. So that family, it's special. And I can mention someone else because everyone, you know, has impacted my life. But one colleague of mine that has been, you know, great influence in my life is Ruben. We're just talking about him before we started here. And he is the son of Margarito. Margarito moved to Venezuela with Daryl Hardy like decades ago to start the work. He first started in Mexico, and then Daryl said, hey, we need someone in Venezuela, would you come? And then they moved with the entire family there. Ruben was 14, if I'm not mistaken. And he would go to school and then come back in the afternoon and go see the shop. And then he would say, can I help? And his dad asked Daryl, said, hey, the kids want to learn how to weld and things like that. Can they come to the shop? And Daryl said, you know, like with these rules, they can come, you know, they can come and help. And he remembers like, you know, helping his dad, and he fell in love with Maranatha. And if you talk to Ruben, it's been 25 years. I've been with Maranatha for 18. I think for him, it's like 25, 26 years involved in this mission in multiple countries around Central America and South America. And I don't know if a lot of people understand this, but I'm 38 now. I've been 18 years with Maranatha. In a few years, I will have more time with Maranatha than without Maranatha in my life, you know. Yeah. And so it is basically our lives. And it's similar to Ruben. You talk to him like you hear Maranatha, like, you know, pouring from his mouth. It's like, you know, the love he has for the organization. And it's not the love of his paycheck. It's the love of the mission. And you know that when you have a conversation with him. He's not worried that, oh, like, you know, I need to do this because it's my job. He's like genuinely like worried that every decision we make, it's impacting donations. Like every time you save money, you're doing a blessing to the church so people can get to know Jesus. You're being respectful to every donor that puts a little money into this. And you have a lot of people that work with us that's their job. They come, they have to build the church. Sometimes they come, they help us for a few months, and then they quit. Some people really like their job, and they would do that really well. And some people really love the mission. And Ruben is one of those. He's a man that loves Jesus and loves what Maranatha does. And you see that in every interaction you have with him. And I have learned a lot from just being around him. And, you know, it's one of those people.
One thing I wanted to ask you about is guys like Ruben, our staff, are you know, workers that have been working with Maranatha for decades, that have gone from country to country. Like, how hard is their job? Not just the physical labor, not the work, but I mean, it's not an easy job, is it?
No, and you know, Maranatha has evolved. It's 50 some years now. The world has changed so much. In the past, the way that we would do some of the projects is that you would pick the best guys and ask them to come help you in different countries. And imagine, like, let's say, you know, you have your family, you have your kids, and your wife is like studying, like university. And Maranatha calls you, hey, would you come move to a different country? Some of those guys would say, I would love to go, but my wife cannot go. Can I go for a few months at a time? So some of those guys would go for a few months and then come back to visit their families, and they would do that in different situations. And we had so many discussions about this, how it would be nice that the families are together. Some families, they don't want to move. The wives say, hey, I would love for you to continue working with Maranatha, but I don't want to leave my family here. And some of those sacrifices are huge. And like for Ruben, for example, I know he has gone to countries with his mom and dad, like I mentioned. Later with his wife, his daughter, his older daughter, Evelyn, was born in Ecuador, for example. He was with Maranatha in Ecuador when she was born there. Now she's finishing university, starting university in Peru. It's a different country. Sometimes when you move, for example, the US systems, I think school starts in August all the way to May, June. Yeah. In South America, many countries, it's January to December. So let's say you move your daughter, she may lose 6 months here, but then she catches up. Like when she moves back, she lost a full year. So you're going to have that situation. Okay, can we homeschool? In some countries, you can homeschool. So you end up having to make those, sacrifices that will impact your kids' lives, can impact your marriage. And some of those guys really like traveling. So, for some, it's okay. For others, it's like the job, like I mentioned. And it's hard to keep moving around. And when we do short projects, imagine that you're coming for a year. To a country. So you move your entire family for 1 year. You start to make friends. You start to get to know the country. Project's over. Let's start again in a new country. And then that impacts your kids' lives. Like, let's study music. If you don't teach music yourself, what do? You get a teacher. They teach you for a few months. Now you move. So everything gets impacted by that. And yes, it's not easy. It's not simple. And again, it's a big sacrifice they make for the mission. Not all of them do it for the job. A lot of them do it because they love our mission and they understand that they can impact the world in their way, and that's why they do it.
Just have a couple more questions for you. We could keep going.
Yeah.
But we could also continue on the
6 hours.
The third episode, another year or two.
Yeah.
What would you say is the favorite part of your job?
So I think that like I mentioned, the job is you have your regular job where you have to fill reports, you have to, do accounting, and that part is sometimes boring like in any other job. I would answer that in two ways. I love to getting to know new cultures and new places. And that's fun, but it's not something I do very often. We don't move to a different country every other year. And I only lead projects once in a while. So I get to know some of those countries that way. But I think the favorite part, and it's not like super fun, but I think when I think about it, it's probably one of the parts of my job that I enjoy the most is visiting some of those places when we arrive in a country and getting to know the people. I remember in Africa, you would go and then sit with the members sometimes after. I had a car that had a tent on top, a top tent, like a rooftop tent, and then you open the tent and you sleep on top of your car. Next morning by 5, the sun's up, so you wake up and start visiting new churches. And when you stop at night, someone says, hey, you can park your car by my house here. Sometimes it would be a simple place, sometimes not a house, like just a little, thatched roof type of place. And you would listen to stories, and that's pretty special. Like you get to know some people that do far greater sacrifices than what we do. Like the Iquitos, for example, let's go back to that one. We met a guy that was interviewed in one of those episodes, and the sacrifices he did to tell people about Jesus in going down rivers, like hours in a little boat to evangelize this little village. I don't know if I would be able to do those. I don't know if I, like leave your family and they're not getting paid. It's my job. I have the benefit of doing missions and getting paid. For some of those people, it's because they understand that the mission is to take Jesus to some of those places, and they would walk many hours in muddy paths. They would take boat rides. He has a condition. I think he has like some health issues, and he's diabetic, and he would have issues when he's out. Like imagine you're out on a boat ride for hours, and then you need your medication. You forgot your medication. So many stories you hear from people that are doing great things for Jesus, and I think that's a amazing part of my job.
There's a lot of sacrifice by a lot of people,
Yes.
around the church, around the world.
Yes.
And yeah, I agree. I think in the travel that I've done, getting to see where people live and the openness that they have, and opening up their homes to you is probably one of the most special things that hardly anyone gets to see.
Can experience, yes. Yeah. Even on the mission trip, you get to see some of those, but we get to sometimes sit with them in their homes and share a meal with them and listen to stories. And sometimes you wish you have more time, but it's pretty special. It's nice to get to hear some of the stories and many amazing things. I'll tell one more. Remember, like once in Mozambique, I opened my computer and I had Google Earth open. And I was looking at it, talking to some of the people that are like, oh, what's that? And like, oh, this is the Earth. And, like we take that for granted. Some people have never seen the Earth spinning around. They have never seen a computer before. And I looked back, there was probably like 40, 30 kids like in the dark looking at the computer, and I called them all and I was like, okay, this is like a little class. Yes, and then I was showing them, and you press a button in Google Earth and then it transitions from the globe to the sky. Look at the stars, look up, and then like you see the stars. Look at this star, and then it's right here, and then you show, this is where I'm from Brazil. You have to travel across an ocean. They have no idea that there is an ocean. Like they live in this little village in the middle of Africa. They have never been to school. They haven't seen a book that explains an atlas or anything. And you explain, okay, yeah, there is this body of water. So it's incredible. It's amazing. And what did I do to deserve being born in Brazil? We got to ask Jesus about that when we get to heaven, and all the blessings I had in my life. I could be the one, looking at a computer for the first time when I'm 30 years old and, amazed with the world. So, it's special
it
to
certainly is.
Get to meet new people.
Last question. You spent last almost couple decades working for Maranatha, seeing the church at work, seeing God at work. What have you learned personally about God over all of this time?
Yeah, a lot. I had a conversation with Gilberto when I was in Africa in the beginning, and we think sometimes that going to the mission field will transform your life. And I remember he was explaining that mission field can bring whatever you have in you and make that, stronger. So if you love Jesus, mission field can make you love Jesus more. If you were uncertain about that, being in the mission field, being in Africa or like in a different place, even if okay, I'm doing mission work, it doesn't mean that your life's going to be transformed and you're going to start to love Jesus because of that. So the challenges you have may become so strong that you give up. And, 18 years, we all have our journeys with Jesus. And I got to decide for myself that I wanted to be a Seventh-day Adventist because, I was born in the church. That's one thing. I was baptized when I was 9, and I'm glad that I got to study in Adventist schools all the way to university. But still, there is a point in your life where you decide that, okay, I really love this Jesus. I believe in the Bible, and this is what I want for my life. And the being involved in missions in the way we do with Maranatha is not a ticket to heaven or like, a certainty that you're going to be in love with Jesus. And that's one of the things that I've learned with being involved in this way, that it's nothing that is certain. You have to decide to follow Jesus every day, even though you get to see the church growing, you're helping. And it's very, very important to me when I look back and when I look at my life to know that it's a decision that gets renewed every day. And once you're now involved in missions doing that, you get to see miracles all the time. I think maybe a little more than Pastor Steve K says that, like when you're in a mission setting, everything is more, it's not like miracles happen more there. You maybe pay more attention to it because of what you're looking for. So it's mission. I'm looking to see where Jesus is working. So you notice that. Yeah. And I get to notice that more. And I decided for myself that I love this Jesus and I want to be involved with it and help tell others about it. So,
well, I've loved getting to know you over the last 7 years since I've been with Maranatha, and your legacy with Maranatha has been a wonderful thing all around the world, and glad that you're here in our office now and more recently, and really thankful that you joined us again for a more full episode on Inside Missions.
Thanks a lot.